who happened to be her best friend, about what she thought was a weight problem. As far as he was concerned, she didn't have one. When he looked at her, what he saw was a full-figured, 31-year-old attractive and desirable woman who could start anything and everything inside him to stirring. The woman was temptation at its finest. However, when it came to her, he was prodded to look beyond temptation and see something a lot more lucrative and worthwhile. Little did she know, but he intended to open up a whole new world for the both of them. "Thank you, Morgan," she said, closing the door behind her and breaking into his thoughts. "I'm here for our 2 o'clock appointment." From the sound of things, she intended to be all business, and that was okay for now. He would give her this time, because in the coming weeks, he intended to get his. She would find out soon enough that she had just walked into a steel cage, and there was no way out. He had failed at Plan A, but he had just put Plan B into full motion. Lena pressed her lips firmly together as she looked across the room at the man leaning against his desk, Morgan Steele. She thought the same thing now that she did that night she'd first met him. He had to be the most gorgeous human male to grace this planet, which prompted her to put her guard up even more. The last thing she needed in her life was a man, especially one like Morgan. She'd learned her lesson a few years ago that when it came to pretty boys and fine-as-a-dime men, she had to watch her step. But still, although she tried not to stare but couldn't help herself, she'd been attracted to him from the first. Maybe it was the beautiful coloring of his skin, which reminded her of deep, rich chocolate. Or it could have been the long lashes and dark eyes. And heaven forbid if she left out the chiseled jaw, high cheekbones, low-cut black hair, and a pair of lips that were too provocative to be attached to any mouth. The first night they'd met, he'd surprised her by coming on to her and asking her out. She had turned him down flat. To this day, she really didn't know why he'd bothered, since men who looked like him didn't go for Amazons. They were usually seen with the slim, willowy model types. Evidently, when she'd turned him down, he'd seen her as a challenge, and had asked her out several times after that. But each time she would decline. Finally, she had felt the need to put an end to whatever game he was playing by explaining her position on dating to him. She was too caught up in other things she considered more important than to be added to another man's list as his flavor for the month. As with any potential client, she had done her research, which really hadn't been necessary since Morgan's oldest brother, Chance, had married her best friend Kylie over a year ago. Besides, most people who'd lived in these parts for a relatively long period of time knew about those 4 Steele brothers who ran their family business, the Steele Corporation. Chance, at 37, was CEO. Sebastian Steele, nicknamed Bass, who had gotten married just a few weeks ago, was 35, and the corporation's problem solver and troubleshooter. Morgan was 33 and headed the research and development department of the company, and Donovan, at 31, headed the product development division. Then there were the 3 female cousins of whom only one, Vanessa, worked in the company as head of PR. The other 2, Taylor and Cheyenne, had established careers outside of the family business, but maintained positions on the board of directors. "May I offer you something to drink, Lena? Spring water, juice, coffee?" Morgan's question pulled her thoughts back in, and she licked her suddenly dry lips and tightened her hand on her briefcase as if it were her block of strength. "No thanks," she said, moving closer into the room. "And since you're a busy man, I'm sure you want us to get right down to business." "Yes, I prefer that we do, since I have another meeting in about an hour." She nodded, glad they were on one accord. She hadn't known what to expect when he'd set up the appointment. From past encounters, she assumed he was a laid-back sort of guy. It was refreshing to know he could be strictly business when the situation called for it. "Would you like to have a seat so we can get started?" he asked, pushing away from the desk and pulling her thoughts back on track. "Yes, thanks," she said, forcing the words out from a constricted throat. He was dressed in a business suit that made him look like he belonged on the cover of an issue of Sexy Man magazine. She took the seat in front of his desk, and as soon as she sat down, she noted once